Hello and welcome to the Daily Politics. In the last few minutes, it's been reported that Andrea Leadsom is to pull out of the race to become Conservative leader and Prime Minister. Mrs Leadsom had faced criticism over the weekend after appearing to suggest she'd make a better leader than Theresa May because she's a mother. We'll have the latest reaction to this breaking story. Angela Eagle is preparing to challenge Jeremy Corbyn for the Labour leadership. His supporters say party members will elect him again, but will he automatically get onto the ballot? Tony Blair was not on trial, and the Chilcot report passed no verdict on his guilt. But could the Prime Minister who took us into the Iraq War now be held in contempt of Parliament? And promises and predictions. Who will hold the rival camps to account for the competing claims made during the referendum campaign? All that in the next hour, and with us for the whole of the programme today, Conservative MP and former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, Nigel Evans, and former Labour leadership hopeful, Chuka Umunna. Welcome to both of you. But first this morning, that breaking news that Andrea Leadsom is preparing to pull out of the Conservative leadership race. Let's talk to our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, who broke this story. Laura, it's incredible. I mean, we've had an incredible few weeks, and this is the latest and very dramatic turn of events after a fast-moving weekend of news developments. What's happened?
Well, Joe, you're absolutely right. Just when you think you might be able to pause for breath for a single second or so, about an hour and a half ago, somebody suggested to me that it might be worth watching very carefully what Andrea Leadsom was going to be doing today. Like any reporter, I suppose my hackles rose, and after what she'd had a very, very bumpy couple of days after that story in the Times, a few more inquiries suggested that actually she had taken what's happened in the last couple of days so seriously and found the first few days of the leadership race so bruising and so difficult that actually she has, I understand, just in the last 24 hours decided to quit. Now, that will of course be a real disappointment for many of her supporters, people who had grown to know her and admire her through the course of the EU referendum campaign. But more to the point, the big picture of all of this is however difficult we'll hear it's been for Mrs Leadsom when she comes out of this blue door in 10 minutes or so, this could mean, subject to however the Tory party decides to proceed, that within days, potentially, Theresa May will be installed as the Prime Minister, and she will have moved into number 10 and David Cameron will have moved out. Now, basically, the 1922 committee of Tory backbenchers led by Graham Brady has to decide exactly what happens next. But it seems that this means rather than there being a contest, rather than anybody around the country, Tory members or any of us, frankly, having a say, that Theresa May will be subject to a coronation, something, of course, she herself had said she didn't want to happen.
No, but people did talk about it, didn't they, because she was so far ahead in terms of support within her own party. And as you say, it is just her that's left if Andrea Leadsom comes out and says, yes, she is dropping out of the race. Are you expecting her to make a statement right there where you're standing?
Yes, we are expecting it at about 12:15 that Andrea Leadsom will come out and confirm that she is pulling out. You are right, there had been suggestions actually that Theresa May should be the only candidate. She has that overwhelming backing of Tory MPs, you know, nearly 200 of them, 60% or so of the parliamentary party voted for her in the second ballot. And there had even been a petition started by some Conservative MPs. The former party chair, Grant Shapps, was trying to press for this idea of a coronation because of the political moment that we're in. Not necessarily that Tory MPs didn't believe there should normally be a democratic contest, but this is not a normal moment. Given that only 2 weeks or so ago, it feels like a lifetime, we voted to leave the European Union. We are at a huge, significant historical junction, and that is where the demand for Theresa May to take over immediately came from. But as I say, it will be for the 1922 committee, the Tories' internal backbench group of MPs, to decide exactly what the next moves are. If, as we expect, and as this whole press pack here expects, Andrea Leadsom in the next few minutes comes out and confirms that she is leaving the race.
Because many people were disappointed and upset that David Cameron decided immediately that he would step down. The expectation, of course, is that he would stay until September once this Conservative leadership contest was over. It does seem now, Laura, doesn't it, strange if he then extends that, even though it now is clear that we are going to have Theresa May as the next Prime Minister. Minister, why not just hand over immediately?
Yes, Joe, forgive me, I lost just the last couple of words now, but I think it is now extraordinary to think that only 3 weeks or so ago, David Cameron was saying repeatedly, I won't resign if I lose the referendum. There won't be any need for me to go. His senior colleagues on both sides of the EU debate were saying that. They were saying he didn't need to quit, even if this tumultuous referendum result meant that we would leave the European Union. Well, how wrong they were. He changed his mind, they changed their mind, and now it appears basically the extent of the shake-up that the referendum has caused right across British politics has upended everything. There won't now be a contest. Of course, you know, there are leadership contests going on all over the place, also arguably a result of the referendum result, but for the Tories it seems that the extent of the tumult has meant that there will now just be a succession, a handover to Theresa May rather than a contest. Although I understand from Mrs Leadsom the main reason that she will give today is the pressure and what she sees as the abuse that she's been given before she was as she decided to run. Her critics of course will say, well, if she couldn't take the pressure of the early days of a leadership campaign, it's not likely that she would have been able to handle the pressure of being Prime Minister very well. But we will hear in a few minutes her explanation in her own words.
And you're absolutely right, we will hear from her, but tell us a little bit about that interview, the interview where she made those comments about being a mother and that somehow she would have a greater stake in the future of the country. Theresa May doesn't have children, that led to the abuse that just became overwhelming for her.
Well, certainly on Friday night, The Times splashed with a very dramatic headline following a very long interview that one of their senior columnists, Rachel Sylvester, had carried out with Mrs Leadsom. Now, in that interview, she had suggested that she had a very real stake in the future because she has a large family. She's talked repeatedly as a politician about herself as a mum, as a mother, as a grandmother. It's something she's talked about a lot. Now, when she was invited to suggest comparisons between herself and Theresa May, she was asked why she would be a more persuasive candidate. She suggested that part of that was because of her position as a family, as a mother, as somebody with that kind of empathy and that kind of sympathy. Now, she also said in that interview that she did not want that to become a factor in the leadership campaign. In fact, she said it would be horrible if people made that an issue in the leadership campaign. However, the diplomatic version of her upset about this is probably that at best she was being naive. She was not misquoted. Her problem was that she didn't like the way that the Times had used the comments that she'd made in that lengthy interview. So there's been a rather strange 48 hours around this. The Times even had their journalist Rachel Sylvester out defending the way that they had used the quotes. But I think for Mrs Leadsom it was probably part of what had been a couple of days of not unusual but quite bruising encounters with the press. We're just keeping an eye on the door here. I think she's about to come out. So of course, Joe, as soon as she does, I will duck out of the way. Here are some of her team coming out, presumably just before the statement. So, Joe, I will move down here because we're going to take the picture, but I can carry on talking to you while she prepares to come out. Here are some members of Mrs Leadsom's team. I expect her to be out in the next couple of minutes.
All right, Laura, stay with us there, but I'm going to go to our studio guests here for a moment while we wait for Andrea Leadsom to come out of that door. But thank you very much for the moment, because joining me now is John Redwood, who was supporting Andrea Leadsom's leadership bid. Your reaction, John Redwood?
Well, congratulations to Theresa May, and I wish her every success as our leader and Prime Minister. And I hope she will take on board the two things that most excited me about the Andrea Leadsom campaign. One was economic optimism. A lot of us think we can be better off out of the EU. We have a number of policies and measures we want the bank and the government to take urgently, and I hope Theresa can now do that. The other was a speedy and sensible exit from the EU. We want to do it by means of primary legislation in the United Kingdom and sort out the borders at the same time. And again, I would recommend that very strongly to her, because if she wants to build a united party, we had a voice and a point, and I hope she will take those on board.
Right, I think she's going to come out in a moment, because there we can see Bernard Jenkin and Ian Duncan-Smith and Owen Patterson. They are close supporters of Andrea Leadsom. It looks as if they are lining up outside, so presumably Andrea Leadsom will appear in front of them and the gathered press to talk about why she has decided to pull out at this critical time, and in fact has left the path open for Theresa May to to some extent, be anointed as the next Conservative leader and Prime Minister. Of course, what we don't, yeah, she will be. But what we don't know at the moment exactly is how that process will actually unfold, and we have yet to hear, probably from the 1922 committee chair.
I hope, because one of the advantages is we've foreshortened the delay.
Right, well, and that may well be what happens, but that will have to be confirmed. We're hoping, of course, to hear from Graham Brady, who is head of the 1922 committee and will be able to outline exactly what will happen. He's probably going to make a statement at around 12:30 outside the Houses of Parliament, we understand, and that will set out and clarify exactly what will happen. The door has opened. Let's see if this is Andrea Leadsom. No, more of her supporters coming out. The Wheeler, Tim Lawton there. I don't think they're going to fit that many more people on the step if she doesn't appear fairly soon. But obviously, this was a decision that she made overnight, so she hasn't had that much time to think about it. As we have heard from Laura Kunsberg, our political editor, the abuse that followed the interview that she gave at the weekend seemed to have become too great for her, and the scrutiny would have continued, as would be expected of somebody who wants to be Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party. Let's see if this is Andrea Leadsom now. Yes. Let's hear what she has to say.
Good morning. Morning, everyone. So this morning I've written a letter to Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, and I would like to read it out to you. The best interests of our country inspired me to stand for the leadership. I believe that in leaving the EU, a bright future awaits, where all our people can share in a new prosperity, freedom and democracy. The referendum result demonstrated a clear desire for change. Strong leadership is needed urgently to begin the work of withdrawing from the European Union. A 9-week leadership campaign at such a critical moment for our country is highly undesirable. Business needs certainty. A strong and unified government must move quickly to set out what an independent United Kingdom's framework for business looks like. It is also essential that current EU workers in the UK and the businesses that employ them know where they stand. The Conservative Party was elected only last year with a strong manifesto. We now need a new Prime Minister in place as soon as possible, committed to fulfilling that manifesto, as well as implementing the clear instructions from the referendum. Theresa May carries over 60% of support from the Parliamentary Party. She is ideally placed to implement Brexit on the best possible terms for the British people, and she has promised that she will do so. For me personally, to have won the support of 84 of my colleagues last Thursday was a great expression of confidence, for which I am incredibly grateful. Nevertheless, this is less than 25% of the Parliamentary Party, and after careful consideration, I do not believe this is sufficient support to lead a strong and stable government should I win the leadership election. There is no greater privilege than to lead the Conservative Party in government, and I would have been deeply honoured to do it. I have, however, concluded that the interests of our country are best served by the immediate appointment of a strong and well-supported Prime Minister. I am therefore withdrawing from the leadership election, and I wish Theresa May the very greatest success. I assure her of my full support. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Andrea Leadsom, was it a mistake to run? Why have you changed your mind, Mrs. Leadsom?
Well, Andrea Leadsom there giving a statement. She actually read out the letter that she has sent to Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, who will be the person who will announce the timetable that will lead to Theresa May becoming leader of the party and then Prime Minister. Just to take you through some of the comments she made, she said that having left the EU, or British people having decided to leave the EU, a bright future awaits and strong leadership is needed. She said she felt the 9-week campaign would be highly undesirable because business needs certainty. She has, of course, changed her argument slightly because she felt that actually it would have been fine to have spent a few months with a leadership contest that would have been put out to grassroots. But Let's talk to Laura Kunsberg, our political editor, who was trying to ask some questions there of Andrea Leadsom as she went back in as to why she's changed her mind. Laura, if you can hear me, what did you make of the reasons that she gave there in terms of saying that a long campaign would have been undesirable when what the country needs is strong leadership and business needs certainty?
Well, I think, as ever, Jo, I suspect there will be public reasons and there will be private reasons. Her public reasons were very clear. She basically said that a long contest, 9 weeks, stretching out over the summer, was not the right thing at this moment for the country, in the wake of our vote to leave the European Union, and also, as she referred to, with Theresa May having the overwhelming backing of Conservative MPs, more than 60% of them. And, of course, that would be something that will have weighed on Andrea Leadsom's mind, no question about that. Privately, people who are close to her have told me this morning that the abuse that she felt she'd been getting by some of her colleagues and the press attention had been too much. As ever in politics, I think there will be a combination of reasons that changed her mind. But in Andrea Leadsom's words, she wants now a swift appointment of Theresa May to become the next Prime Minister, and she has decided to withdraw from the race. All
right, Laura Kunsberg, thank you very much for the moment. We will let you try and get some more words out of Andrea Leadsom. John Redwood, first of all, you must be disappointed. It was your woman and she's stood down.
Yeah, of course I'm disappointed, but I think it shows why I liked her, sort of decent and honest, and she's put the public and national interests before her own ambitions, and that's very typical of the lady. And I believe the main reasons she set out, the so-called public reasons, they were exactly the points I made to you earlier in this interview, that her campaign, supported by me, was about early and smooth exit from the EU by means of national legislation, not getting too entangled in all these procedures that the EU wants to enforce on us, and being optimistic. So I think there's plenty to be optimistic about on the economic prospect, and she put those first and foremost.
Was she naive to run in the first place, though? Was she naive to
abuse that you've been talking about, and the unhappiness of quite a lot of Tory MPs about her candidature is a relevant factor, because we've seen what happens in the Labour Party when the MPs don't agree with the members and the view of the membership. And she was very worried that she would win the membership, which I think she might well have done, but not carried enough of the MPs with her, and that makes it very difficult.
Should she have run in the first place? I mean, did she just not have quite enough experience? Was it naive to think that she could have had a chance at not just leading the party, but obviously becoming Prime Minister? Very different from, you know, David Cameron, for example, and other leaders who have run and become opposition leaders.
Well, of course she should. I believe in choice. I believe in democratic competition, and I don't expect always to be on the winning side. I've been on the losing side a good number of times. But
yes, well, that's very honest of you.
It's the way of making your case and influencing policy, and what we now wish to do is to convert this into a win for the nation, because the main points she was putting forward are vital to a successful premiership by Theresa May, which is what we now all wish her.
Right. I mean, Nigel Evans, she did say very clearly in that letter that she read out that Theresa May is ideally placed to execute Brexit, and she has promised to do so. In that is an implicit sort of threat, isn't there, that you have promised to do, even as a Remainer in the EU referendum, that you have promised Theresa May to do the right thing and carry out the will of the people. Did you sense that from her comments?
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke to Theresa May just over a week ago. And I talked to her about Brexit. I'm a Brexiteer like John, and I want to see this happen as quickly as possible. I want to see the wishes of the British people carried out. And I got that commitment from Theresa. That's why I was happy to support Theresa May. And she said she's going to put a Brexiteer in charge of the withdrawal of the European Union. That now needs to happen. This expression, by the way, is Nigel being gobsmacked. I mean, who says politics is boring, Joe?
Well, at the moment, I would not want to predict what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes, never mind the next 24 hours.
Congratulations to Theresa May. I'm absolutely certain will make a great Prime Minister. I mean, I know she used the reason that she only got 84 MPs supporting her, Jeremy Corbyn would dream of 84 members of
Well, it was
his
more
own
than Michael
party.
Gove.
I know, but I mean, 84 is a substantial number. And the party will now unite behind Theresa May and absolutely support her in withdrawing the United Kingdom from the European Union as quickly as possible. I mean, I know Graham Brady's going to make a speech in a moment. I'm secretary of the 1922 and I did chat to the vice chairman just before coming on the air because this is uncharted water.
Did you get a sense of what he's going to say then?
No, in as much as he has talked already to the permanent secretary. I think we only have to wait 10 more minutes to find out what the procedure is going to be. But like John, I want this now to happen as quickly as possible. 1922 didn't want it to drag out till the 9th of September. We wanted it to be a far tighter window. And one of the reasons Andrea has used is that we can now get on with the process of government. And I think that now needs to happen as quickly as possible.
Right. Well, let's look at this in contrast to the Labour Party in terms of leadership contests. They've sorted it out, the Conservative Party. There is now going to be, and we know who it is, a new leader and Prime Minister. Why can't the Labour Party sort itself out?
Well, we're going to have a contest now because there has been a challenge. It's going to be launched at the top of this programme, I think. Who knows? Things change every hour, but it's definitely going to be launched today. And there will be a challenge, and therefore there will be a contest in the Labour Party. But can I just say something about the politics of this and then the personal in respect of Andrea, who I know very well, actually. We both were on the Treasury Select Committee together, and I like her personally very much. I disagree with her fundamentally on a lot of things. And just from my own experience, I think one of the things that this illustrates is that if you're going to launch, and I speak from personal experience, if you're going to launch a leadership campaign, it helps if you've spent many months preparing it and put in place an infrastructure.
Did you have sympathy with her reasons if it was a case of too much scrutiny because it was the sort of thing that you experienced when you were running for the Labour leadership?
I have a bit of sympathy with that, but I mean, in the end, I wasn't preparing to run a leadership contest. I was preparing to run a business innovation and skills department in an Ed Miliband government, and clearly Theresa May has been planning this for some time. She wasn't very present on the field of the EU referendum campaign, and I think that had quite a lot to do. I, as a Remainer, was very disappointed she didn't play a bigger role, particularly given the prominence of the immigration debate, and I think part of the reason she didn't do so was a tactical reason in order to win a potential leadership contest. But just two things I would say. The Theresa May government is going to be dominated by Brexiteers. It will be a vote leave government in essence. And secondly, I still think that Theresa May has a lot to prove in showing that she can unify the country. And I just think of the disgraceful role she played in the Islamophobic campaign that was waged against Sadiq Khan in the London mayoral election. I think she has a lot to prove on that front.
Well, and we'll be discussing
role in that campaign.
Right, well, we'll be discussing that, of course, in a lot more detail. Now we know she is going to be leader and Prime Minister. Just briefly to you, will you all unite behind Theresa May? Will there be any problem, do you think, with Tory MPs who are disappointed about Andrea Leadsom dropping out and unhappy about Theresa May becoming leader?
No, I hope not. I mean, we thought we had two very good women candidates. We wanted a good democratic argument, but we now are in the position we're in. And as I said, we will have goodwill. But obviously there will be rebellions from time to time, as there are under all leaders. And some of them will be from her own supporters, I suspect, because they won't all be satisfied. She's now got to balance the ticket, and I do sincerely recommend to her those two fundamental issues from our campaign. Economic optimism. We need to lift spirits and tell people there's not going to be a great big recession. We can get through this fine and things are going to be much better. We can be more prosperous, and we need to have a smooth exit, which I think means doing it at pace.
Right,
we don't want to
doing
hang
it
around.
right now.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, John Redwood. So, Angela Eagle is launching her challenge for the Labour leadership today at a speech in central London. She says she wants to heal the party to give them a chance of winning the next general election. Also sharing his views on the Labour leadership this morning has been Unite General Secretary Len McCluskey, and he had some strong words for those who want to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, calling it a squalid Westminster bubble coup.
This was an attempted political lynching designed to bully and bludgeon Jeremy Corbyn, this deeply decent and kind man, out of the job he was elected to do. This is not just about Jeremy Corbyn and his position. The coup has snowballed into a wrecking operation against the Labour Party itself, destroying it at least temporarily as a parliamentary force.
Well, that's Len McCluskey. The big question in all of this is whether current leader Jeremy Corbyn will automatically be on the ballot paper in a new leadership contest, with both sides arguing a different case. Angela Eagles says she expects Jeremy Corbyn to have to be nominated by 20% of Labour MPs and MEPs in the same way that any other candidate would. The precedent for this is Tony Benn's challenge to Neil Kinnock's leadership in 1988, when Kinnock had to gather endorsements from members of the Parliamentary Labour Party in order to get on the ballot. But Mr Corbyn and his supporters say things have changed since then, and that as the incumbent, he will automatically be on the ballot paper. They say the party rules state that it is only challengers to the leadership who are required to collect nominations, and that they have legal advice to back up this view. Now that Angela Eagle has triggered the process, it is possible other challengers will emerge. Former Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Owen Smith is yet to decide whether to run himself. It is the party's National Executive Committee who must make the final decision regarding the nominations process and the timetable for the election. They are expected to meet tomorrow. Other questions surround the current membership of the Labour Party. Over 100,000 people have joined the party since the EU referendum, many stating their support for Jeremy Corbyn. Once a leadership contest starts, the party will allow people to become registered supporters, a system introduced for the contest last year, which allows people to vote in the leadership ballot by paying a reduced subscription rate. Let's speak to Samuel Townend from the Society of Labour Lawyers, who has given legal advice to the party in the past. Welcome to the programme. So what is your legal opinion on the rules? Does Jeremy Corbyn need to get the requisite nominations or not to be on the ballot paper?
The truth is, Joe, that the rules are unclear on that point.
Oh.
So, although there's one part of the rules which says that potential challengers require 20% of the European and Parliamentary Labour Party to nominate, there are other parts of the rules which talk about how nominees have to present their nominations to the General Secretary in order to stand. So there is no doubt a differing legal views given on that point.
Right. So in the end, it'll be a political decision, if you like. It'll come down to the ruling executive who will decide, I presume, from what you've said. Have you seen the legal advice that's been given to Ian McNicol, who is the General Secretary of the Labour Party, which states that Corbyn does need those nominations?
No, I haven't. The only legal advice that's available was on Jeremy Corbyn's Twitter feed last night, and I think it's been on the Huffington Post a week or so ago, which was very clear and unambiguously stating that he does not require the nominations. However, it also goes, from a legal point of view, too far, in my view, in that it says it is unarguable that he requires the nominations. But the rules themselves do not address the position where you have an incumbent leader and whether or not he or she requires the nominations. So it can't be unarguable. There is an argument to be had, and that, as you say, will be, at least initially, determined by the NEC, which I understand is meeting tomorrow.
Right, so just to be clear, the body of opinion in the Labour Party that says he has to be on the ballot paper, that is not necessarily the case. It could be argued that he could be kept off, which, as you say, leaves it ambiguous in terms of any sort of legal challenge. Because the key passage from the rulebook reads, where there is no vacancy, nominations may be sought by potential challengers each year prior to the annual session of party conference. In this case, any nomination must be supported by 20% of the combined Commons members of the PLP and members of the EPLP, which is the European Parliamentary Labour Party. Any nomination, in your reading of it, does that mean anyone, or is that assuming that the incumbent isn't included in that?
Well, the legal advice goes both ways on that, I suspect. So ultimately, as you say, it'll be a political decision for the NEC tomorrow. Albeit that they will take legal advice. I understand that legal advice has been given to the party, but as I say, I don't know what it says. And then ultimately, if the worst comes to the worst, the disgruntled side, whichever it might be, may decide to pursue matters further in the court.
All right, thank you very much. Well, a few minutes ago, Angela Eagle launched her leadership bid, as Chuka Umunna said. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
These are dark times for Labour, and they are dangerous times for our country. A referendum designed to settle an argument in the Conservative Party has resulted in the country being torn apart, our economy damaged, our society hurt. And at this time, with a failed Prime Minister and a tiny number of Conservative Party members choosing the next one, our country needs a strong Labour Party. We alone can hold this right-wing Tory government to account and then replace it by winning a general election. Now, Jeremy Corbyn is unable to provide the leadership that this huge task needs. I believe I can.
Angela Eagle launching her leadership bid there, saying Jeremy Corbyn doesn't have the leadership skills to continue in the role. And Christine Shawcroft, who sits on Labour's national ruling executive, known as the NEC, joins us now. Welcome to the Daily Politics. You're on the NEC. We've just heard from the lawyer, Samuel Townend, who says it will be up to the NEC to interpret the leadership rules. So, in your mind, are you clear that Jeremy Corbyn is on the ballot paper?
Yes, I think it's quite clear from those rules. When the rule was tidied up in the late 90s, the paper that went to conference actually had, in the explanation column, this requires potential challengers to get nominations. This is papers that went to conference, and it only refers to potential challengers.
Right, but he did say it isn't clear to say it's unarguable. It is arguable. It does say in this case any nomination must be supported by 20% of all the members in Parliament and in Europe too. Do you accept that?
That clearly refers, though, to the sentence before, which is talking about challengers. Challengers needing nominations. Any nomination must get 20%. So I think the rules are perfectly clear.
Right, but does everyone agree with you on the NEC? I understand it's fairly evenly split.
I mean, I haven't seen any. I haven't seen this other legal advice. We've not had any notice of the NEC or recommendations out yet. So we'll have to see what is put to the meeting.
Right. Well, what does happen in this case? Will you see both sets of legal advice as members of the NEC at this meeting tomorrow?
I should imagine so, and there'll be a report. And we have the advice that says that Jeremy is automatically on the paper in any case.
But you haven't seen the advice that says he shouldn't be. And right, that's the advice that's been presented to Ian McNicol. If you can't agree, you know the members on the NEC. You've been on there a long time, Christine Shawcroft. You know how they will split in terms of voting on this. What happens if you can't agree?
I think there are enough people on the NEC, whether they actually supported Jeremy or not, to understand that the party will expect a democratic contest, and that anything that looks like it's deliberately keeping someone off a ballot paper because they worried he would win, this is not going to go down well with the membership, and I think people on the NEC will understand that.
What do you say to that, Chuka Umunna? Should he be on the ballot paper?
Well, I think I'm a lawyer as well. I've read the rules.
We've got enough lawyers, I think, on this programme.
Sam Townend is right. It is not clear what the rules say, and to pretend otherwise is absurd. Essentially, the NEC will make a political decision on this, and what you have is a parliamentary party of MPs. We are a parliamentary party. We believe in implementing socialism through Parliament. That's why it matters whether or not your leader can command the confidence of its MPs. MPs, by the way, who have a mandate from 9.3 million Labour voters. You have a problem in the sense that we've got to try and reconcile that mandate they have from 9.3 million Labour voters with the mandate that he has from 251,000 members, and that's why this process should hopefully enable us to reconcile the two. But I take issue, by the way, with Len McCluskey.
I'm going to come to that in just a second, because they were very strong words. Let me just get Christine Shawcroft's response to what Chuka has just said about the legitimacy of MPs being a parliamentary democracy, and without the support of them, Jeremy Corbyn is not, therefore, a legitimate leader.
that rank and file party membership want to work with the Parliamentary Labour Party. We support, we respect MPs. We do feel that a lot of them owe their positions to us, doing all the leafleting and the knocking on doors and so on. And, you know, if we're going to respect and support the Parliamentary Labour Party, it needs to be a two-way process. They need to respect the democratic decision that was made barely 10 months ago.
Well, what I would say, look, in respect of Christina, I've known of Christine for some time, and I know she's a campaigner. I know she goes out on the doorstep. I know she's done the work for the Labour Party. The fact what I see locally is there are a lot of new people who have come into our party, who've often been members of other parties, particularly the Green Party, Socialist Workers' Party and Tusk, who come in and tell existing members in my constituency party, who do all the work, who do all the campaign, off you go, Joe. Now, we're not doing that, and this is why there is an area of agreement I have with Diane Abbott this morning when she was talking about whether or not there would be a split in the Labour Party. There is not going to be a split in the Labour Party. First of all, I do not see under how under a first-past-the-post electoral system, which we must abolish and replace with proportional representation, in my view, how any new party could come into being. So that isn't going to happen.
Well,
and secondly, for there to be a split, it requires people like me to walk off. I've been a member. I've worked hard to get Labour governments elected, implementing things like the National Minimum Wage, the Human Rights Act, civil partnerships and the rest, in the face of people who are campaigning against us to stop us doing that for almost 20 years. I am not walking off from my party at the instruction of people who have just joined in the last 2 minutes and start thinking somehow no longer can the Labour Party be a broad church, which is what its strength is.
Right. I mean, and comments by Len McCluskey saying that people like Chuka, I presume he's talking about Chuka Umunna and other colleagues who have similar views to him, of bullying and bludgeoning the Labour Party, of them being a lynch mob. Is this the sort of language you think that will unite the party?
Well, I think you need to talk to Len McCluskey.
But what do you think? Do you agree with Len McCluskey?
I've been a member of the Labour Party twice as long as Chuka has been, and I've seen the branches be invigorated. There are now twice as many people active in my branch Labour Party, coming to the meetings, doing all the work, going out on the doorstep. There's been a lot of talk of entryism. As far as I can see, it's returnerism, which is probably not a word, but people left over the Iraq War and
heckling and intimidation that we haven't seen in the Labour Party for a very long time. And I say to Len McCluskey,
I think we're seeing
part of the issue that people have with the current leadership is sheer competence. Now, we had a vote on employment tribunal fees last Monday, and we were instructed to abstain on an increase in employment tribunal fees. I and others said, what on earth is the Parliamentary Labour Party doing abstaining on a vote like this when we should be three-line whipped to vote against an increase in employment tribunal fees? And then, too late in the day, the whip was slightly changed and we did nothing on this issue. Now, if I was a business secretary, if we'd won the election last year, we would have abolished the current unfair, unjust employment tribunal fee scheme. That harms Unite members, and because of incompetence on the part of our current leadership, nothing was done about that on Monday, and that is why I'm not surprised that you have almost half of the Unite members saying that they have no faith and they want to see change. Because in the end, it isn't that 251,000 members who suffer, it's the communities the Labour Party was set up to serve, hard-working people who need a Labour government implementing Labour values.
Let's put that. I mean, there is a charge of incompetence, if you like, or lacking leadership skills to win the next election. Do you believe that Jeremy Corbyn can win the next general election?
Absolutely. There have been a lot of reverses against the Tories whilst Jeremy's been leader. We've won by-elections with increased majorities. The man is brave, principled, honest, inspiring. He's inspired all these members to join the Labour Party, far more than in any of the other political parties put together.
So why can't he convince? Why can't he convince MPs like Chuka Umunna? If it is so clear in your mind and so many of the new members, why is 80% of the parliamentary party accusing him of being a poor leader?
We've had the last two general elections were lost with policies very much on the austerity light, Tory light
ridiculous.
times.
That is
ridiculous. What was that about heckling and bullying? I think so that is why the Labour Party membership we're so keen to have a different kind of politician leading us.
John McDonnell has just adopted exactly the same economic position in respect of our fiscal policy as Ed Balls. To suggest that somehow we were standing on an austerity-like ticket is ridiculous. Just in my brief alone, what would we have done? We'd have introduced a blacklisting inquiry inquiry, which the Conservative government refused to do. We introduced much more stringent laws on 0 hours contracts. We're going to increase the minimum wage. We're going to reduce university tuition fees. I absolutely reject this notion that somehow we're a warmed-up version of the Tories. How dare anybody suggest that? How dare they suggest that?
Because we went into Parliament, into the election, saying, oh, we're going to make cuts as well. They won't be as bad as the Tory cuts, but we're going to make cuts. We're going to cut public sector wages and terms and conditions. No wonder working class people are not inspired by that.
But John McDonnell, of course, has said that he would have hands-on economic competence, that he would instruct some cuts to be made. Was he wrong?
I think there's a big difference. There's every difference in the world between the kind of policies on which we fought the last 2 general elections and the kind of policies the Labour leadership are espousing now.
Right. Well, I mean, you obviously fundamentally disagree, you two, and it's clear, and we've had this sort of debate played out. You say you're not going to walk away from the party, but wouldn't it be better to allow Jeremy Corbyn to be on the ballot paper, fight that leadership contest, and if you believe so strongly that members will support your view, then win the leadership contest. Do you back Angela Eagle?
I don't think. I'm pleased that Angela's challenged. I think it was quite right for people in the party to say, look, if PLP, the Parliamentary Party, hasn't got confidence, where's your challenger? There is a challenger in Angela Eagle. I very much welcome that. And I think we should have a proper, robust debate. Look, in the end, I don't know. As I said, I think this is going to be a political decision made by
But do you think
NEC.
he should be on the ballot paper or not?
I think we should follow the rules that we've had, which is that you need to get the nominations. He accepted that.
So you think he shouldn't automatically go?
And let's not forget, when Neil Kinnock was challenged for the leadership, as you said, back in the day, Jeremy Corbyn was one of the leading people in the Benn campaign to challenge him, and they seemed to demand that Neil get the nominations then. So it seems slightly contradictory to now say that because Jeremy's in the leader's office, he shouldn't also have to do what Neil Kinnock did.
Well, it's unclear actually as to whether he had to get those nominations. Neil Kinnock, he chose to. He chose to.
I mean, look, what's happening in the Tory party does illustrate one thing, is that when you've got political parties, look, we're not protest groups. I don't agree with, the leader of Momentum said yesterday that winning elections doesn't matter. I think winning elections and implementing Labour values are mutually dependent things.
Right, well,
that's why getting into government and actually having a leader who can implement an agenda through the parliamentary party is so important. Now, Andrea Leadsom could see where they were going to head, which presumably is part of the reason she's pulled out, because she could see...
So you still want Jeremy Corbyn just to back down? He's not going to do that, it seems, just at the moment. I mean, he's made it clear he's going to stand, and he's got a very powerful union behind him. But in terms of going ahead, do you think Angela Eagle would make a better Prime Minister than Jeremy Corbyn?
Yes, and I believe that people watching this programme, who not only want a Labour Party which is electable and that commands their confidence, but wants a credible opposition, join our party to make it happen. Because at the moment, many people don't think they will have a choice at the next general election. Angela Eagle will help give them that.
I must ask Christy Shaw, if it comes to it that in the end Jeremy Corbyn is not on the ballot paper automatically, will you and others at that point leave the Labour Party? Will you decide that it has been a stitch-up in your mind if he's not automatically there and break away?
We've been through quite a few stitch-ups over the last few years, and we've also seen quite a few tweaks to the Labour Party rules since Neil Kinnock's time. 10 months ago, Angela Eagle put a letter out to all the members saying that she respected their views, she would work with whoever they voted for, and so on. I voted for her as deputy leader on that basis, and, less than a year later, she's gone back on that. So I think we need a leader we can trust.
Right, but what's your answer to the question if he's not automatically on the ballot paper and then doesn't get the requisite nominations? What will you do?
There'll be a big campaign. There've been talks about a write-in campaign, for example. It's impossible to say now what might happen, but certainly I've always encouraged people to stay in the Labour Party and fight for what we believe in.
Thank you very much, Christine Shawcroft. Back to the news that Andrea Leadsom has pulled out of the Conservative leadership race, leaving the field clear for Theresa May to become Prime Minister. Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, which oversees the conduct of Conservative leadership elections, has made this statement in the past few minutes, and our reporter Adam Fleming was there.
Following the decision of Mrs Andrea Leadsom to withdraw from the Conservative leadership contest, the Right Honourable Mrs Theresa May is the only remaining candidate. The process is now that I, as chairman of the 1922 committee, and the board of the Conservative Party must formally confirm that Mrs May is the new leader of the Conservative Party. I will make a further statement as soon as I'm in a position to do so. Thank you.
When are you meeting?
We're already in discussions. I've had a very useful conversation with Rob Semple, who chairs the voluntary party, and we will be seeking to get answers from the party board during the course of this afternoon.
Will Theresa May be Prime Minister by the end of the day?
I think we need to respect the process. There are constitutional things which need to be followed, as well as the party's own procedures. But clearly we are going to be in a position to answer those questions much sooner than we had previously anticipated.
Can you give us an idea how long we might be waiting? 2 days, 4 days, a week?
Well, it won't be 9 weeks. Let's be very clear about that.
Right, playing a straight bat there, Graham Brady outside the Houses of Parliament stating the obvious that Theresa May will be Prime Minister. It is just a matter of time and working through the due process. But as he said rather glibly, it won't be 9 weeks away. It will be much sooner. And of course, as soon as we know, we will tell you. Now, there was strong criticism of Tony Blair and his decision to take Britain to war in Iraq in last week's Chilcot report. But Sir John did not rule on the legality of the war or the former Prime Minister's guilt. But now a cross-party group of MPs is attempting to have Mr Blair held in contempt of Parliament. And yesterday on the Andrew Marr Show, Jeremy Corbyn suggested he would be supporting the move.
I urge colleagues to read the Butler report and read the Chilcot report about the way in which Parliament was denied the information it should have had, the way in which there was lack of preparations for the post-invasion situation in Iraq, and the way there were the assertions of weapons of mass destruction. Parliament must hold to account, including Tony Blair, those who took us into this particular war. That is surely what a parliamentary democracy is about.
I started with a yes or no. Let me try and finish with a yes or no. So vote for the contempt motion,
well,
yes or no?
I haven't seen it yet, but I think I probably would.
Well, we're joined now from Aberdeen by one of those campaigning for Tony Blair to face contempt of Parliament charges, former SNP leader Alex Salmond. Alex Salmond, just explain to our viewers, what does contempt of Parliament actually mean in practice?
Well, a contempt motion, if it's carried, then would have a range of potential penalties. It would mean that someone could be dragged to the bar of the House of Commons. It means they could be stripped of their Privy Councillorship. It could mean they could be barred from ever holding public office again. The exact range of penalties would be determined by a Commons committee, but first you'd have to have the verdict before you got the sentence.
Right. And in terms of the verdict, this would be a motion that would say that Tony Blair had deceived Parliament. Is that right?
This would be a motion which says exactly that he held Parliament holds him in contempt because of his behaviour, and it would illustrate the range of evidence for that, which is amply demonstrated in Chilcot. The most powerful aspect, in my mind, is that over a period of almost 18 months, if you juxtapose the private memos that were given to George W. Bush, the American president, with the public statements given to Parliament and people, it's quite clear that Parliament was misled on a series of issues over a series of months. This wasn't a single mistake or two. This was a deliberate campaign of deception, as Jeremy Corbyn rightly said, and therefore any Parliament worth its salt must have the courage to rise to the question of parliamentary accountability.
Right, but Sir John Chilcot also said in that report that the legal basis for the war was reached in a way that was far from satisfactory. He didn't explicitly say it was illegal. He also said clearly that Tony Blair didn't lie, that there wasn't a deliberate intention to take the country to war on a false premise, even though we know now that weapons of mass destruction didn't exist in Iraq.
Well, on the first of these, of course, that wasn't within Chilcot's terms of reference to rule the war illegal, as you very well know. And as you probably also know, that the government is denying a Freedom of Information request at the present moment, which will set out the range of background papers as to why that was excluded from Chilcot's terms of reference.
But you've quoted Chilcot as the background for your motion, and I'm just saying, as you said, he didn't talk about the legal or illegality of the war.
Well, he did talk about legal legalities, as was in your question. He said the legal basis was unsatisfactory in process. But can I just repeat the point? What's required for a contempt motion is to show that over a period of time, the Prime Minister was saying one thing in private to the President of the United States of America, involving, for example, speculation on regime change towards the end of 2001. By the summer of 2002, he was committing himself unconditionally to be with the President of America come what may. And by the spring of 2003, he was deceiving the processes what were going on in the United Nations, what Chilcot describes as undermining the authority of the United Nations. Now, these are juxtaposed with what he was saying to Parliament and to people.
All right.
What he's saying to Parliament was something else entirely. What he was saying to Parliament, if I can finish this point, was this war was not about regime change, it was about weapons of mass destruction. He gave Parliament no information that he'd committed himself to war. On the contrary, he said he was requiring to strive for peace. And in the United Nations, what he told Parliament was that he would only go against the will of the United Nations if there was an unreasonable veto from a single country.
Well,
in all of these areas, over a period of time, he was misleading Parliament by saying one thing in private to the American president and another thing totally in public to Parliament and people.
Put that, let's put that to Chuka Umunna. Is there enough evidence, as Alex Salmond has set out, to show that Tony Blair misled Parliament on a number of occasions and therefore should face this motion?
I think Chilcot is inconclusive on that, and frankly, Alex Salmond is in no better position than Chilcot to pass judgment on the legality or not of it.
But he's not just citing the legality, is
yes,
he? Alex Salmond is citing a whole range of issues.
And most of the people who cite that cite the summit between the President of the United States and Tony Blair at Crawford, Texas.
We'll be with you whatever is what he said in that memo.
Where he was accused of giving a cast-iron commitment to take military action, whatever, and that is denied, and there is apparently no evidence for it, according to the Chilcot report. But let me just say one thing about this. Look, I wasn't in Parliament at the time. I fundamentally disagreed with the decision to go to war because I didn't feel it was a last resort, and I felt the weapons inspectors should be given more time to do their work at the time. Now, look, I wasn't a public figure. I wasn't on the record as saying this, but that was my position. But I actually think the most important thing, given all the death and bloodshed that there has been, is that we learn the lessons from the mistakes that were made and that they're never repeated again. I think actually that would be far more useful for us than... I mean, look, if this motion is passed of contempt, I'm not too sure... Well, what does it really achieve? I mean, that's the issue here. And now, is this posturing, or are we actually trying to make sure that we don't have bloodshed in the future, but also that where we believe we can make a difference and build, well, at least reduce bloodshed in the world by acting militarily, that people feel that they can take that decision. But
right.
I'm not sure where does this get us?
Well, where does it get us, Alex Salmond? Because we've had 7 years to wait for the Chilcot report. It was thorough. It was fairly conclusive in terms of the blame that it laid at the doors of many, many people, including Tony Blair. Is that not now the end of it?
Well, first let me help Chuka with his evidence. If he reads even the summary, you'll find on page 34 a memo from Jack Straw to Tony Blair, which reads, when Bush graciously accepted your offer to be with him all the way, quote, unquote. And if he bothers to read the full report, as I have done, then he'll find ample evidence to show how Parliament was misled over a period of time. Now, to answer the question about why we should do this, there is a question beyond the processes of government to one of parliamentary accountability. Because although I strove, and I was in Parliament and on the record, Chuka, against the Iraq war at every possible occasion, I accept there's a collective responsibility of Parliament to critically examine what they're being fed by an executive of the day. And one of the ways you can establish that is to show that Parliament believes in that process of accountability now. Just as we should accept collective responsibility for parliamentary failures, you illustrate that by holding those who misled Parliament to account so that a sequence of events such as the Iraq disaster never happens again.
Alex Salmond, thank you. Nigel Evans, just the last word on this. The Speaker has to decide that this motion is put to the House. What do you think John Bercow will do?
Well, I don't know is the answer. John has been incredibly good at allowing Parliament as much say over events as possible. So I would not be surprised at all if this motion is actually put to Parliament and let them have their say. I mean, I've been an MP for 24 years. I don't believe in that period I've had a contempt motion coming before Parliament. I think it was the 1950s the last time somebody was dragged to the bar of the House to apologise. But I've got used since June the 23rd to uncharted water, so, we are where we are.
All right, Alex Salmond, thank you. Now, let's go back to our main story. Andrea Leadsom's dramatic announcement that she is withdrawing from the Conservative leadership race. In the last few moments, Theresa May's campaign manager, the Conservative MP Chris Grayling, has made this statement outside Parliament.
Theresa is currently on her way back to London from Birmingham, and she will be making a statement later today. But on her behalf, I'd just like to say that she is enormously honoured to have been entrusted with this task by so many of her parliamentary colleagues. As Andrea's statement made clear this morning, now is the time for us to unite as a party and to get on with the job of doing everything we can to secure a strong and prosperous and successful future for our country. We all know, that Theresa will do everything she can to equip our country for the challenges that lie ahead.
Chris Grayling, their spokesman for Theresa May, and she is making her way back to London, as you would expect, bearing in mind the fast-moving events. Listening to that are Kevin Maguire of The Mirror and Lucy Fisher of The Times, who are both on College Green. Well, Kevin Maguire, at the beginning of the programme, Nigel Evans said he was gobsmacked by what's happened. How have you responded to the latest round of developments?
Politics is changing at a bewildering speed. It has been since that Brexit vote, and nothing is certain anymore. But today we do have a new Prime Minister. It's Theresa May, and because Andrea Leadsom pulled out in a statement avoiding the motherhood row, which we believe she couldn't stand anymore, and she was in tears and a broken woman over it, and why she's gone, she ignored that. But she means that 199 Conservative MPs have now picked the next Prime Minister of Britain. We thought it would be 150,000 Tory members, 0.23% of the population. Well, it's an even smaller group.
Right, the only thing we could say with certainty, of course, Lucy Fisher, was it was going to be a woman. But that was where it kind of stopped. What was your reaction when you heard that Andrea Leadsom was stepping out?
Again, very surprised. I don't think any of us necessarily saw this coming today. As Kevin said, I think this is going to spark a big conversation now about whether there's going to need to be a general election. Of course, in the UK, we don't have a presidential system, but many people might think, well, we voted for David Cameron as Prime Minister. It's not okay just to have a tiny handful of MPs select the chief of our country.
Do you think there should be a general election, Kevin Maguire?
I do. I don't think Gordon Brown's coronation worked very well for him, for Labour or Britain. And if we don't have an election, and let's be honest, it's really a quasi-presidential system now because of the importance of the Prime Minister and the profile of the Prime Minister. It means the government will be led, the country will be led for nearly 4 years by somebody who wasn't elected at a general election. Under the Fixed Term Parliament Act, I think there's only two ways to have a general election. One is a vote of no confidence in the government, or the other is 2/3 of MPs voting for an early election. If Theresa May, as Prime Minister, after she's had her kitten heels under the cabinet table for a few months, decides she wants one, she could challenge Labour in its very sorry state to actually go for an early general election. It'd be very hard for an opposition party, which is supposed to want power, supposed to want the government out, is supposed to want an election, to resist that offer.
Right. What about the Brexit negotiations? Because when Andrea Leadsom read out her letter to Graham Brady, she said Theresa May now will have to step up and push ahead with the Brexit negotiations. Will they happen much more quickly, do you think, Lucy Fisher?
I don't know about speed, but already I think we've seen Brexiters coming out, leading Brexiters on social media, and I think we'll hear more of this today, feeling quite annoyed at the speed at which Theresa May has been coronated. I think they're expecting this 9-week campaign, during which time they had hoped to extort from her much firmer promises and confirmations as to what she plans to do with Brexit. So I think there will be concern among Brexit MPs and campaigners.
I mean, that's going to be critical now, isn't it, Kevin Maguire, on exactly how those negotiations pan out, or there will be bitter disappointment from many people.
Oh, absolutely. And who she points as her Chancellor,
yes.
Foreign Secretary, who's going to be leading the negotiating team. The Brexit group are going to want to play a prominent part. They've already got a sense of grievance, but it is astonishing that now all the leavers have left the race. It's going to be Remainer, the only one remaining in, who will be Prime Minister. It's almost a mirror image now, the opposite of what we got in the vote of the referendum.
Right, well, it is a topsy-turvy world.
Yeah.
Just briefly on the Labour contest now. Lucy Fisher, do you think Jeremy Corbyn will be on that ballot paper automatically?
Personally, I can't see how this contest goes ahead without him being on it. Tomorrow we have the all-important National Executive Committee meeting, which will decide the legality of whether he automatically gets on or needs the 51 MP signatures. I think there will be such a sense of injustice if he's not on that contest. Many people who perhaps don't even support him will think, well, hang on a second, this just isn't cricket, and he could end up getting a groundswell of support even from people who don't support him.
Right, in the closing seconds of the programme, do you agree with that, Kevin Maguire, and if so, would he win again?
He would win again. He should be allowed to stand for just basic democratic reasons, but given politics is so crazy at the moment, Labour could well try and keep him off.
Right, and would the party split at that point?
I think it would certainly splinter and fracture. Quite how fundamental the split is, we don't know. It could be worse. You could have two bits of the party that hate each other trying to live together.
Right, well, the two of you better get back into Parliament. Something else might have changed in the time you've been speaking to me now. I don't want to predict what's going to be on the programme tomorrow because there are many, many hours to go, but that's it for today's programme. Thank you to our guests, particularly you two for being our guests of the day. The 1 o'clock news is starting over on BBC One now. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye.
I will try to go to Europe.